So my name is Richard Josie. I'm the chair of the SM-ITAM group. Hopefully you know who we are as a group. We're part of the BCS, and tonight we have our rock star presenter, Daniel Breston, who is here to challenge us. But before we get into that, there's a couple of things that I would like to let you know about. We have got, as always, a conference coming up. Our conference is going to be in October this year, and we have a theme set for this, which is on my screen over here. It is automating value, driving better outcomes. So the idea behind this is we have themes like AI, which are coming up, and integrating automation into service management and IT asset management. And how do we utilize these up-and-coming technologies and good practices into producing the kind of outcomes that we want to get. So taking ideas from all of these kind of things. So one of the things we're always on the lookout for is speakers for that. So if anybody here would like to volunteer themselves or volunteer one of their colleagues or associates, we would be very, very grateful and be looking forward to hear from you. So we will also be having an event in May, which we had some challenges scheduling exactly, but it will be like this, a virtual meeting where one of our committee members, Marilyn, will be leading the session. So that will be a very interesting session coming up. And we will let you know the exact details, probably through the same channels you've heard about this. So, as I said, Daniel, I'll waffle for a little bit to let a few extra people join the meeting so nobody misses the real start, because nobody really cares and wants to listen to me particularly. So as you can see now, the participants list has increased significantly. So, Daniel, so my understanding is here you are to challenge us. I know you've certainly challenged me quite significantly in the past, and I've seen you doing it to other people. So I expect more of the same from today's session. What I found with Daniel is, particularly when the focus is directed at you, you don't always like the feel of it, but it always makes you think. This is very much the mentoring approach that I know Daniel likes to take. So I'm looking forward to what he has to say. What I would also like to say with this is an interactive session. We will, of course, have questions and answers at the end of the session, but do feel free to ask questions in the meantime. I will be monitoring the chat, and I'm happy to interrupt Daniel on your behalf. Or if you would like, you can interrupt him yourself, just like we would if we were in a face-to-face meeting where you just use the normal technique of shouting down and get your point made. And hopefully that will work. So Daniel, you know yourself far better than I do. So why don't you give the final introduction to yourself, and we'll get the show on the road.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you, Kylie, and everyone for joining me tonight. I'm going to stop playing with my mouse so the slides don't go up. My name is Daniel Breston. Richard and I have met on a number of occasions, either with another organization like the ITSMF, or more relevantly, I guess, in the BCS SMSG group, back when there was such a group. And I was the event coordinator for that, which helped me become a fellow of the BCS. I've been in IT for 50 years. I believe I've probably done or managed every role that there possibly is in a technology department over those 50 years. Cloud, AI, any one of the practices that you can possibly name and stuff like that. But the challenge that I always had as a leader was that I would say one thing and everybody else would hear something else. And that's a problem, because as a leader, what I say kind of goes, but if you're not doing it, then I either want to think that you're kind of dumb, or I want to think that you're, being irrational, or hey, I could just outsource a lot of you. So it was pointed out to me probably about 2/3 of the way through my career that I needed to change the way that I think, and I needed to change the way that I speak. If you've ever read books by David Marquette, excellent individual. He was very, very, very high up in the Navy. He had an up and coming career. He thought his next boat would be the, cream of the crop of what the US Navy had to offer. And instead they gave him the worst submarine in the Navy. And its performance rating for the last 3 years was the worst submarine in the US Navy. He went and told them to do stuff. They just kind of looked at him and went, not on this submarine, sir. We can't do that. Why not? Because this isn't that type of submarine. So he was using language that they didn't know. They were trying to tell him that it didn't work, and they had to figure out a way to work with each other. So I'm going to try to bring some of those examples of leadership and language into this presentation. And as Richard will tell you, some of the ideas that I might express, people are going to go, that won't work, or gee, that's nice, but it's all theory. So I just want to tell you that everything that I'm telling you, I've done or others have done alongside me as we consulted or helped individuals. I also like to start off with some fun stuff. So I saw this, and this was kind of interesting. I'll let you read it, but it kind of points out the fact about language. Everybody was saying exactly what they needed to say, and yet nobody understood what they were really trying to say. So this is a perfect example of what I've been trying to say, in my introduction. And the attitudes and behaviors of your organization are driven by language. And if the attitudes and behaviors of your organization aren't coming across the way they're supposed to be, or people aren't understanding what needs to be understood, then your culture is going to suffer. Think about back in January 2020. If you in IT had gone over to your organization and told them that you were going to take the entire organization, put it on a common communication network, the internet, such that everyone would be able to work with each other. And yeah, there might be a couple of bumps, but say within 2 to 3 weeks, it would all be done. They would have laughed you out of the floor. I know they laughed us out of the floor when we told them that. They didn't believe us. They said, you guys have never acted that fast before. Never happened. But when COVID came, what happened? How fast did you have to respond and change the way that everybody was working with each other, talking with each other, communicating with each other, collaborating with each other? This is what we're talking about. It changed the culture of your organization. Things are not the same now, and you're not going to go back to the way you were before COVID. And you start looking at things like the Harvard Business Review had a survey question. So think about this for a second. I'd like to have some comments back on this. They wrote the survey in such a way that you could not choose both. There was no both in either of their questions. So think about this. Is your IT there to make or save money? Is your IT there to make or save money? Anyone?
I can give you a short answer on that, Daniel.
Go ahead.
My organization is there to make money. I work for a private organization.
Okay. How often, Richard, are you being asked to save money rather than make money? Your IT.
It's
So not the organization itself, but the IT part.
I think we've probably got where you want to go with this. The balance is pretty good. The IT part is, I mean, it's a relatively small part of the company overall.
So IT is always being told,
facilitate.
we love your budget request that you went and did back in July, that we finally might have agreed to give you in January, except no, it's 30% less. So the organization is there to make money. IT is there to save money. Shouldn't the answers match? I mean, shouldn't the answers be the same? This is what Harvard Business Review is trying to get across, was that one of the culture issues or attitude and behavior issues is that you're killing yourself trying to save money, and your organization is trying to make money. And now you're on two different completely strategy, or your tactical team is not helping your strategic team. So that's going to cause discourse.
Daniel.
Right? Yes, ma'am.
It's Kylie here.
Hello, Kylie here.
So just quickly, I think if people want to comment or something, please feel free to take yourself off mute. Otherwise, just pop something in the chat box. Specifically to Daniel, the thing is, right, you've got commodity IT as well. So if we think about the electricity system, 150 years ago, or maybe even not quite that far back, if people wanted electricity, if corporations wanted electricity, they generated their own.
Yep.
So these days, of course, that's pretty much unthinkable, unless, I mean, you might have a UPS somewhere that keeps going, keeps a factory running or whatever. But pretty much, you're not in the business of generating electricity because you've got specialist electricity. So we're moving to cloud, which is commodity, but there is still that overhead that there's the facilities management people, buildings, electricity, keeping the lights on, literally. I mean, so you've still got that internal overhead within your organization that is managing the commodity technology. So do you sort of feel that that's maybe where a lot of the sense of IT is there to save money is actually, well, IT is actually commodity these days, or much of technology is commodity, unless you are directly engaged in driving forward business competitiveness or whatever it is that is your raison d'etre for existing.
When you wrote your proposal to go to cloud, did you tell the organization you were going to go to cloud, and while it might be a cost bump at the beginning, overall you would save money? Or did you write your cloud proposal and say, hey guys, not only am I going to spend money, but you know what? My spending of money is going to help us make more money as an organization.
Is that to me? I don't write cloud proposals. I'm in procurement. I know
but that's
the
everyone who goes into commodity, or everybody who says let's outsource, the proposal says this is what we're going to save. And I'm wondering how many people are brave enough to say, actually, we're not going to save anything, guys. Sorry about that. There's stuff to pay for. We're going to use stuff at Amazon or Microsoft or Atlassian or whatever cloud vendor is your favorite. They're going to charge us for that. But because of that, we're going to be able to make money. So are we talking the same language as the organization? And the language of the organization is attraction of customers and the ability to make money. I mean, the number one news story today is not Brexit or COVID. The number one news story today is football.
Yeah, Daniel, it's Ken Quayle here, but all of these things are, rather than IT making money or facilities making money, they're enablers, aren't they? They're enablers for the business to make money, in much the same way as you said about COVID, is in that 1 week or 2 week period, we needed to enable the business to continue to make money.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're always an enabler. The target should be about whatever your cost is and whatever your spend is enabling the business to make more money, or at least provide it the opportunity to make more money, because you can't always say that if we deliver this, you're going to make more money. It's providing them, it's enabling them, it's giving them the opportunity.
I totally agree with you. And I like your enabling word. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to park your statement for just a few slides, if you don't mind me, because I'm going to come back to this. And I'm going to ask this question in a completely different manner. Okay? But thank you very much for bringing that up. And let's see how this goes. So before COVID, think about the perception of your organization, of their IT. How happy were they with you? Did you guys own the digital water cooler? Did they come to you with issues? Did they know that you were always going to be able to help them? Did IT have conversations with them such that, you know, the things that were going on in the different types of approval meetings could clearly be linked back to, visually clearly be linked back to some business directive? In most organizations, the answer to that would have been no. So just wondering, but Richard, you can see people. I'm not looking at people, but I'm going to ask you a question. If people could just raise their hands, how many people are involved in some type of DevOps initiative? If you just raise your hands, and Richard's going to do a quick count for me, please. How many people are involved in some types of DevOps initiative?
Most people have left their videos off, as in everyone except me and you.
All right, okay, so people are raising their hands.
I'm seeing participants raising their hands.
Okay.
That is, we're on 3 at the moment.
Okay.
Anyone else? 4? Any?
I can't work out how to do it. You might have to tell us how to raise our hand.
Let me work out how to do it.
So
I can lower everybody else's hands. I've worked out how to do that. There's...
Yep. If you go to reactions, to reactions on your video button, you'll see that you have a raise hand button. Oops, why can't I go the other way? No, I want to go this way. Okay. For those of you that are DevOps, I'm sure that there's also a number of you that are agile, or one of the 42 flavors of agile, probably Scrum or Safe. So keep in mind the fact that if you're agile, DevOps, or Safe, listen to how this is going to play out. So ITIL, IT Service Management, Verisym, Service Integration and Management, SIAM for suppliers, DevOps, any of the 42 flavors of Agile, all say that they are customer focused. They all say that that's the most important word. They base that on the fact that the things that we do in IT are made to order by request. We don't do things unless they've been requested. We don't do things unless to improve until we've talked to the customer and gotten feedback, and we know that they're happy when we solve their problems or fulfill their request. And to me, the customer now is the second most important word. I totally agree that customer is very important. You don't have an organization if you don't have customers, no matter your size, okay? But for me, the number one person that you need to take care of is staff. They're the ones who are using the IT. They're the ones who are taking advantage of everything that we're giving them to help customers. And in which case then, they're the ones that have to best coordinate at all levels with the IT in the organization to be able to get the IT that they need so they could go do things better, faster, safer, and with more satisfaction. Now, that type of thinking comes from the DevOps movement. It comes from the agile movement, comes from ITIL 4. It's difficult sometimes to recognize, but we're going to start thinking about the fact that, you know, IT has always been there to help people. And now how do we do that? So for those of you that are, you know, into these different frameworks, I'm going to ask a question. Richard has heard me ask these questions before, but some of you are using an initiative that was introduced in a ski lodge in 2001. How's that going for you? Anybody know what I'm talking about? What's the initiative that was introduced? Yeah, you don't count. What was the initiative that was introduced in a ski lodge back in February 2001?
We have one answer in the chat. Oh,
And it is
been sent to everyone. We've got two answers. We have the Agile Manifesto. We have Agile.
So think about that for a second, because you're right, it is Agile. So it's February 2001. A bunch of programmers went to a ski lodge for a couple of days. Most of them got really kind of drunk, but they had a great time creating the Agile Manifesto, the 4 values and 12 principles. And now it's March 2001, and you're a developer in some organization, and you've heard about this. And you go into your CIO's office and say, hey, look, these developers went to a ski lodge for a couple of days and created this thing called Agile. And I can tell you now, it's going to take over the world. And we need to be right at the forefront of it. How do you think that conversation went? Let's go to a different question. I'm sure that many of you have heard of ITIL. How many of you think that the UK government right now has a great IT practice? All the things that you do on the UK government, when you go to their websites, it's fluid, it works well. NHS, HMRC, DVLA, though that has improved greatly, thank you. You know, all of those different types of websites, do they do well? Because the last 27 years, ITIL, which was developed for the UK government so that they could help their development team, aka what I'm calling the ski lodge team. Think about how that's really worked in your organization. And if it's strange asking and answering these types of questions, when you're asking your organization to do the ski lodge stuff, or you're asking the organization to do the UK government practices, if you don't have a common word for ITIL, if you don't have a common word for Agile, and not everybody appreciates what that is there any question then that your attitude and behavior and your culture for these things aren't balanced?
Daniel, it's Ken again. They're bound to be imbalanced because most of these things are frameworks, and they're really only down to the quality of the rest of the wrapper that you put around, you know, your implementation of that framework. And quite frankly, we've probably all seen completely disastrous versions as well as seeing good ones.
So Ken, how many times a year do you budget?
We fundamentally budget once a year, but we're asked to reforecast probably 2 to 3.
How many times a year are you using Scrum?
In the purest sense of Scrum, probably not all of the time, but our backlog is broken down into sprints, and it's run that way basically all year round.
So 26 times a year, you change the way that you work, you introduce something, you get feedback, 2 weeks later, you change the way you work, you get feedback, you do something, but the budget to allow to do that, the money, the resources, the people, the tools, whatever, is only once a year.
Correct.
To me, that doesn't seem to be reasonable.
It may not be reasonable, but I guess it's life for almost all of us on this call.
But that isn't the intent of these frameworks. The intent of these frameworks, the intent of the language of these frameworks, the intent of the principles and values of these frameworks, and I'll show you an example in a couple of slides, is that we're aligned, right? How many times do we hear that? IT is aligned with the rest of the organization. Well, we're not aligned.
But the frameworks themselves, I don't think pretty much any of them really mention budget. You're right, in order to pay for the momentum work, you need to relook at it, but they don't really mention budget.
But SAFE does.
SAFE does, but it's the exception.
DevOps does. ITIL 3 and 4
I
do.
don't think it says that every time you review things, every time you change things, that you do that budget review.
Ooh. I think since budgeting is a plan and funding is an action, you go back and look at the value stream. And if you've impacted the value stream positively or negatively, then you should go back and impact that plan. In which case, then you should go possibly impact the funding associated with those activities, not just money, but everything else that goes with funding.
Yeah, but my reality on that is if you do that and you've made a saving, they take the money away. If you do that and you need more funding, they say no.
But now that everyone is on a common network in practice, I would venture to say that those organizations that are being more proactive and receptive to those types of discussions are going to be the ones that we see still around in 2022 and 2023 and onwards. And the ones that are keeping to more traditional ways of doing things are going to find themselves struggling because the other organizations, I mean, we have small little companies in Herne Bay in Kent, below Whitstable. There was a pizza parlor that decided that they were going to go live on the internet. They were going to take all their orders over the internet, and they kept their menu the same. Nobody wanted any of their items. They decided that they were going to offer everybody a pizza for £7, and you could take 5 items. You could take 5 items, and then for every item that you added, that would be another £1. And now they just can't stop making pizzas. They changed the way that they worked, and it changed the way that they attracted customers. And because of that, they're having a great time. And they did that because they were flexible with their website and their IT and their thinking. And so they, use technology to its benefit. And I think larger organizations are starting to see the same opportunities now.
I agree with you, Daniel, but I think finance is a really interesting one because, of course, finance is not owned by IT. IT operates under a financial management regime that is implemented by a completely different team that is highly regulated. And so, to a certain extent, as IT wants to change, we have to be engaging with that team and saying, can we change too? And to a certain extent, accounting, my partner's an accountant, the rules and ways of working for accounting are, 400 years old. IT's a newcomer on the block.
So I've worked with banking for 33 of my 50 years. And I've had to, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your point of view, deal with US regulatory organizations, UK organizations, and EU organizations. And I totally understand the challenges of regulatory government type stuff. The interesting thing that I'm seeing now as an independent consultant is that now that they've been COVIDed So I'm just going to make up a word here.
Mm-hmm.
They've had to change the way that they work, and they're now beginning to see what we've been yelling at them for the last decade. You need to help us use our IT in different ways, and you need to help us with the data that we're managing and the things that you're asking us to do, because what you're asking us to do isn't always reasonable and making sense. And they're more open to those types of conversations. And part of the reason for that is, and some of the questions are on this slide, is we have people that are saying, we've gone digital. Fantastic. What does that mean? Well, we've got everybody on the internet, we're all using Zoom. And there are a number of us that are going, but that doesn't mean you're digital. That just means you're on the internet and you're using Zoom. Digital transformation means is that you've looked at stuff that you're doing in your organization, and you've decided that across the value stream of that organization, you're going to change the way that you're going to work and take advantage of technology to do that. You're going to digitize your data, and you're going to flow your processes and practices through such that from the time that somebody wants something until the time that it's given to them of value, that can mostly be done over some type of technology discussion, technology tool. For those organizations that say, look, we have digitally transformed, ask yourself, what did you transform? What really changed? Can you explain why you transformed that aspect and what the benefit was to a customer or staff? And how involved were they in that discussion? So Forbes, McKinsey, HBR, Medium, I could keep going on, are all saying that staff have to be involved in these discussions. If you really want to be, radical, you bring suppliers into the discussions as part of your teams. There are organizations now that are creating DevOps teams, and the normal 7 to 9 members that you have now has a 10th member, and that 10th member is the supplier. It may not have to be there all the time, but it's somebody that's there because if they're involved on that 2 to 3 week sprint that you're having, then you're beginning to see less incidents and more rapid change.
Daniel, because that's exactly what's been happening to me with a couple of my customers recently.
Okay.
And I can say, as a supplier, it is a very engaging and exciting thing to be involved in.
And I think that's good for me to hear, because we wrote about that in ITIL 3, in ITIL 2. We did do a very good job of carrying that message into ITIL 3, and we've gotten back to saying it again more clearly in a lot of the, not necessarily the base material of ITIL 4, but the adjunct material that's coming out. DevOps has been saying it for a long time. Various agile people have been saying it for a long time. The lean enterprise people have been saying it for a long time. A couple of words about leaders is, I'm sure that most of you have heard the words, and I've used them as myself as a CIO, was, guys, I'm going to motivate you, I'm going to inspire you, we're going to collaborate, we'll have some consensus, let's push to the finish. And when I asked my team what they heard, they told me we heard coercion. We heard, you want us to comply. Or we mentally said, whatever. This great quote by Barry O'Reilly, we judge ourselves by our intentions, but we judge others by their behavior. Collaboration is based on the belief that others have something to offer. Really? Collaboration is based on the belief that both of you have something that you want to give to each other. Surely, isn't that true? So we want to use these words. Sometimes we're not always saying the same thing to each other. And the impact of that is, and this is from the Lead Enterprise Institute, we used to say, do it my way. I said this a lot. And the 1970s, 80s, and part of the 90s, it was, okay, you know, let's do it your way. We're going to be empowered. I think empowered is the scariest word that you can tell an employee. You're empowered. Anybody else have that? You're empowered. I'm going to empower you. Do you automatically know all the guidelines and guardrails and everything for that empowerment? Do you really know what you can and can't do? How empowered are you? What does empowered mean?
I think, Daniel, when people hear the word empowered, they think it's just, okay, so you're giving all your work to me. You know,
well,
so that
exactly. Yeah. Thanks a lot, boss. Empowered is just another word for delegation. Great. Absolutely. You know, I think what we're beginning to see now is that all of these movements, these, whatever you want to call them, I dislike the word framework, to be honest, but, you know, these different things, you know, that have come together are all starting to say the same thing. You know what? I, as a leader, and you as staff, and you as a supplier, because I need suppliers nowadays in my life, okay? The three of us, we've got to work together and we've got to figure this out. I think the strongest message that ever came to me as a CIO was, we were running one of the largest AS400 facilities in the United States. We were doing 35 to 40% of the daily equity and commodity transactions in the United States. And if any one of the AS400 had an issues, BatDan went into, you know, power mode, and I was going to figure this out. One day, my staff, and I had some really good staff, fantastic developers, fantastic enterprise architects, security people, AS400 systems analysts, whatever. I came into work one Monday. I could not sign on. The only thing I could get to was email, which was kind of disconcerting because I had every security password in my head because I had set them. And they had figured out how to break that, and they had revoked all my access to everything. And they gave me an ultimatum. And the ultimatum was, you're either going to manage us in such a way that we can follow you where you want us to go, or you're going to be one of us and we need to get a new leader. But you can't do both. And that was kind of eye-opening to me. They wanted to follow me, but only if I allowed them to do it as a team. So they were more than happy to, you know, go with me and figure out things and stuff like that, but only if we could do it together. And that was mind-blowing to me. It was quite revolutionary that these people would come, you know, together and go, we're going to figure out how to do this. And we realize that we're doing 40% now. We think we can do 50. So some tips, and as Richard will tell you, and I'm sure if you guys are looking at the pictures on my wall, there has to be at least one Batman in every presentation. So I was talking to the people at ITIL 4, and I love DevOps, and it dawned on me that these two pictures are the same. The picture on the left is from ITIL 4. The picture on the right is the ever-famous DevOps infinity loop. And they now both match. Somebody wants something. Let's figure out who has to help do that and how we're going to do it. Let's design a way forward and get what we need. Let's build it and see whether or not it works the way it's supposed to work. Let's provide it to them and see whether or not they're satisfied with that. And then based on that feedback, let's figure out how to improve it or get rid of it if we need to. Both of these pictures are now the same. The practices of ITIL 4, most of the practices that are now in Agile, almost all of the practices that are now in DevOps are all around this concept of working together, truly looking at how we can work together as a team and using a common language to be able to create stuff that helps staff, helps customers, helps our communities that are based on technology. And technology now is what the world is. COVID has forced the world to go to IT. IT now owns the water cooler. People come to us, and if you've read the Phoenix Project, go to the middle of the Phoenix Project, great book, almost a decade old. Halfway through the Phoenix Project, the head of security has a nervous breakdown. They find him in a gin bar. They sober him up. He comes back to work, albeit he's shaved off all his hair. He comes back to work. He and the interim CIO arrange a bunch of meetings with all of the senior individuals in their organization. Every meeting is 15 minutes. They only ask 2 questions. What are your priorities for the next 4 weeks? What are your obstacles in getting there? And they take notes. No comments. No, we can do this for you. No, we can do that for you. Nothing. 15-minute meeting. What do you want to do in the next 4 weeks? What are your obstacles in getting there? They went to finance, they went to marketing, they went to the head of manufacturing, they went to every part of the organization and asked those 2 questions. They went back into IT. They had taken all of the IT initiatives that they had, all the change requests that they had, and written each one individually onto a Post-it notes. They had over 400 Post-it notes in this conference room. They looked at every single Post-it note and went, this will answer this person's needs. This will answer this person's problem. This, we have no idea what the heck we're doing with it. Stop it. 4 weeks later, they went back and they had the same set of meetings again. And they kept doing this routine until it was an iterative cycle of every 2 weeks where they were talking to the organization and then using technology to help the organization do things better, faster, safer, and with more satisfaction. There are now loads of organizations that are doing that same thing. Now, whether you want to say that they're using Agile, DevOps, Lean, ITIL, Cloud, Digital, to me, they're all marketing terms. I don't care. They're taking advantage of technology practices to help their organization do stuff. And I think that's what we've gotten to in our world, is that our language and the language of the organization now needs to become as similar as possible, no matter where in the organization we are. So let's go back to that budget question. We're asked to do things 26 times a year if you're in Scrum. Every 2 weeks, you're asked to change something. If you're in DevOps, you have the opportunity to change things on a daily basis. Actually, in Scrum, you have the opportunity to do things on a daily basis. Or in ITIL 4, you have the opportunity to do things on a daily basis. I mean, there's a lot of us who, you know, there is no cab in ITIL. There's never been a cab in ITIL. You cannot find the words change advisory board in any ITIL book. You can find where you have to have governance, you have to have guidelines, you have to have guardrails, you have to have things that match to a plan, which is what a budget is. But then as you go through the year, adopt and adapt those changes, because if you're really attracting more people, you want more money to be able to attract more people. And I think that's what we're trying to get to now. We've gone digital. We've gone to the internet. We want to go digital. And the only way to do that now is to align the tactical with the strategic and make that link as short as possible. We also want to have metrics that matter. This is a real KPI. It was created by a bank in Belgium, and it was going to be used as a way to monitor the lines of code that developers did on teams. Anybody here understand it? Because when they showed this to the development teams, they walked out en masse. The developers in 5 different countries just walked out en masse.
The only thing I understand about it, Daniel, is to start with, it looks like it's too complicated.
You reckon?
And the second thing I would say on it would be the first thing I learned when I went to university, which was a couple of weeks ago, was about lines of code. It's easy for a bad programmer to produce lots of lines of code. It is difficult for a good programmer to do the same thing in 1 line of code. But it will run faster and better if you can reduce the lines of code. So measuring lines of code is always a recipe for disaster. That was one of the first things that I got taught when thinking about programming, before we even started about what programming was, how you do it, any of the concepts you actually need to program anything, was the moment someone tries to manage the number of lines of code you have, you probably should walk away. This is obviously a lesson well received.
Go ahead, Richard, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, this is obviously a lesson that's been well received from your point that the developers walked off.
Yep. And when they said, okay, what we'll do is we'll match one team against the other, we had the same type of result. We had the same type of predicted result, because the developers for one part of the organization might not have to do the same type of things, regardless of skills, as another part of the organization. So now, how do you create metrics that matter? And one of the things that is now coming to fruition is, back in the 70s, the image on the left was written by people that had gone to Toyota. And they recognized the fact that the executive level had some things that they wanted to do and a way of being able to know whether or not it was being done. And they worked diligently with the rest of the organization, who then worked diligently with the delivery teams and suppliers to have a constant dialogue of what was being done versus what was desired. And that created the Deming learning loop, plan, do, check, act. What Steve Bell did in his book with Mike Orson, Lean IT, 11 years ago, was he said, you know what, I'm going to put ITIL into it. He redrew it and said on a regular cycle, what we're going to do is we're going to have a software development backlog. And that software development backlog is going to be moderated by the demands of the hospital, because this is where he developed his cycle of knowledge, but it can be developed anywhere. You can take health plan out. But it's the same type of discussion. On a quarterly basis, we're going to come up with the high level stuff, such that on the 2-week cycle and monthly cycle, we're going to be able to match that, and it's just going to be ongoing. So the annual budget cycle went away. It became a revolving budget cycle matched with an ongoing funding cycle. Amazon loved that concept so much, they went and used it as the basis of their SRE model. So for the way that they work, they reward people, they take things away depending on whether or not they break or not. But this was just a way of getting people to talk to each other in such a way that the value of what IT was delivering matched the pace of the organization. And I think that's a real big problem for a lot of people in IT, is being able to prove that they're adding to the value of the organization. The other thing I see, and I mentioned earlier about killing the cab, and I was very serious about that. Why do we have a cab? Why do we need a cab? How much of what the cab does can we replace with better testing practices? And don't even get me started on service level agreements. But when you go into these meetings and you have these discussions, and I would do this, I would go into a meeting, I would have my management team around me, and I would go, hey guys, we're going to discuss this today, and this is my feeling on it. And then I would ask, what do you think, guys? And of course, everybody's going, oh, yeah. You know, there might be a couple of questions or something like that, but overall, I kind of almost got my way. After all, I was the hippo in the room. I was the highest paid person in the room, and I controlled the paycheck of almost everybody that was in the room. So I was asking a one-sided question. For those of you who've gone to agile conferences or DevOps conferences, one of the things that they like doing is asking everybody to write on a Post-it note an idea. They put the Post-it notes up, and then without any discussion of what is on the Post-it note or what could be discussed on the Post-it note, you look at it very quickly, and as you go along, you vote. You put a mark, you put a star. In which case then, you're asking the team, and you can do this in meetings, you're asking the team to make a decision and removing the fear. And if you can't get to that, at least start asking the people that aren't voting, or the people that vote in a different way, what are you seeing that I don't see? Do you think I'm trying to lead the team in the wrong way? And leaders that can do that also are now allowing their people to feel empowered in voice and getting that collaboration in communication, because they're starting to remove that coercion board.
But Daniel, sorry, do you not find that one of the big challenges in that, when you're kind of going through that question piece, is that organizations are incredibly bad at explaining context about why they want something, why the business is trying to do something in a particular way. They're great at putting out these marketing messages that say, we're going to go and do this, and we're going to do that, but they never actually tell anybody the context of why. Yeah, what the background is. And that's key to making decisions amongst amongst these things about what the priority is, or indeed whether you go left or you go right. Because a bit like your sat nav, you know, do you want the lowest mileage, you know, route, or do you want the most fuel efficient route?
And I 100% agree with you, and I'm going to take it a step further. Not only don't they tell them why, but they don't tell them why it matters to them. So as a CIO, I could very well tell you, Ken, why it mattered to me. And you in your head might say, but it doesn't matter to me at all. So why should I help you? You're a CIO. You only have an 18 to 25 month time frame before you move on to another job anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hang 10. Unless you can convince me that it matters to me, why should I even get involved? So I think leaders need to change the way that they interact with their people and say, guys, we have some ideas on the table. I don't want to discuss them first. I'd like to get your views first. In fact, I don't even want to get your views first. I just like everybody to vote. You can secret vote, you can hold your hand up, you can do whatever you want to, but you know, the ideas that people vote on are the ideas that we're going to discuss as a team. And I'm not going to say anything until the very end. So now you put the hippo to sleep. And you start getting this discussion. I also think that annual is now too long. The world is moving too fast. And so going to a quarterly discussion that allows people to get involved 4 times a year, or even going into monthly discussions 12 times a year, where your product owners are now working with their product teams, which is what they're supposed to be doing, and explain to them, if we do this, this is what the organization gets back. I mean, for those of you who've gone through Gaming Works simulations, such as Mars Lander or the Phoenix Project, that's brought out in the simulations. The more you understand what the requirements of the organization are and how you, or how the way you work impacts that, the more money, value, satisfaction you get in the organization. And the simulation of that in one day is awe-inspiring.
Yeah, but I know that when you know, people will look back and they'll go, COVID, I don't think there was any doubt in anybody's mind the context in which they needed to get the people working from home. It was clear and it focused, and on the whole, most companies delivered.
How many high street banks have opened up their doors to service small to medium organizations, new small to medium organizations? So I'll make it even more succinct. I'm a single consultant, freelance, well, retiring single consultant, freelance. No high street bank will work with me, okay? The message that you get on their website for new business accounts is, because of COVID, we only are serving current customers. We are not opening for new customers. It's been a year now. Surely you figured out how to work with customers. You've gotten customers. Well, why can't you do the same thing now with us? And so small banks.
All of that's just a smoke screen, isn't it? They don't want the business.
Well, but every high street bank?
Well, I think those that want that business are managing to find a way of providing it.
They're not getting it. Star Bank is, Metro Bank is, Tide Bank is. Those banks are providing it. They're the newcomers to the organization, or you're going outside of the UK and opening up a bank account someplace else.
Daniel, my take on this is the answer is fear, and it tells back to your point on the communications coming from leadership. one of the things that I've observed, and obviously you've held this senior position, so I'm very interested in your take on this. One of the reasons why senior leaders don't necessarily explain why they want to do what they want to do, they tell you what they want to do, is that they have got used to having information that they don't share. So, for example, a leader will not tell you that they wanted to get pay rises for the whole department and then failed, because it's not seen to be a good thing, or that he didn't want to give everybody pay rises. He'll say, yes, of course, I'd like to get you it. He provides what he thinks you want to hear. So there's a reticence to be entirely open. And I think what you're saying with the bank, you have the same thing there, is they're not necessarily being open as to why they're not being open, but there's a fear that's driving it. You shouldn't be putting out information or making decisions that you shouldn't be making. And what happens is that dovetails into other things. So like with this at the moment, they don't know you, you're a risk. They don't want risk. So they want to just close the door to risk. And I think it's a similar thing with the leadership challenge, is that if they make a statement as to why they want to do something, they risk revealing too much of their hand. And they're probably looking more to their peers. If you're on the board, you want the CEO to like you more than you want your staff to like you. So if you do something that your staff love and the CEO hates, you can be fired. If you do something that the CEO loves and your staff hate, you're probably quite safe in your job.
And I won't disagree with that, and I'll go even further. You might ask me a question and I don't have the answer. And as a leader, I'm always supposed to have the answer, aren't I? After all, that's why my name is Mr. Leader. So if you ask me what direction to go and I go, no idea. I mean, honestly, I have no idea. Is that a good answer or a bad answer for a leader?
It's a bad answer for a manager, but it's a good answer for a leader as far as I'm concerned.
What would happen if you got rid of the word leader and made everybody managers? Because I reckon that they're the same.
I don't think they are, because I think managers are literally, they're managing you to do something, whereas a leader wants to lead the team to achieve something.
So
yeah, and I think they're very different ways of, I suppose ultimately they're achieving the same thing, but they're very different ways of approaching it.
So is a CIO a leader or a manager?
He should be a leader.
But he manages 5 or 6 direct reports.
Yeah, and those 5 or 6 direct reports are probably the people who should be doing the managing.
So
probably
those 5 or 6 direct reports. I'm sorry?
That's probably a flaw in organizational structure.
Probably a flaw in organizational structure.
I disagree. Sorry, jumping in. I don't know if anybody's ever looked at any of the pro-side change stuff, but the way pro-side drive change is really interesting. It's very focused on middle managers. Leaders drive through that big picture vision stuff, and it's scary. The middle managers are the people who are in place and they've directly got people reporting to them. And those are the people who are scared, sorry. So if you're driving through change, you need to engage not just the actual people at the end of the chain who are doing the doing, but you also need to engage the middle managers to make sure that those middle managers can reassure and remove the fear of those people who are actually doing the doing. And I, as a strategy consultant, I struggle if I am in front of a team leader. Team leaders don't drive change because team leaders are focused on making their people happy, making their people productive, and making people feel safe. A good team leader is focused on that. And that means no change, whereas a leader drives change.
So I think that it's interesting that you used leader at two different levels in your discussion. You had the senior leaders and you had team leaders.
Yeah.
And in the middle, you had this thermal layer of people called managers. And I'm wondering whether or not, and I'm not saying that everybody should go to the Spotify model of one flat chain, because that's Spotify and that's the way they worked, and trying to copy what they worked isn't going to work in most organizations. But I think people are beginning to consider that the way that they're organized and the way that they talk to each other and the way that they hold meetings. I mean, for those of you who've read 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni, and then read all of his other books, you know, you get the impression of we're not doing this effectively and efficiently, and we need to break the mold that we're in. And Jeff Gothelf says one of the ways that we can do that is by changing the way that we talk to each other and in the way that we ask each other stuff. So if all of your change requests or all of your, if all of your change requests were written in this way, what would be the impact? We believe as a CIO that our services are designed to achieve these, and you mentioned the goals. All goals should have financial, customer, regulatory, staff, at least, type of goal. We have observed that the service product process isn't meeting these goals, and you give examples, which is causing this adverse effect to our business. And you highlight what the effect is. How might we improve that service so that our customer, staff, whatever you want to put in there, are more successful as determined by, and you come up with some measurable criteria. And the measurable criteria change more easily over time than the more solid goals. So it's kind of like if you're on a sailboat, you take more readings, you still want to get to the island, but you're taking more readings to make sure that wind change or current or whatever are getting you to where you want to go. It's not a perfect template, but it does start to get people to talk to each other differently. Because if you ask people to say at the team level, I mean, imagine the product owner now comes over and says, okay, this is what we need to do. How are you guys going to know that this is being done in such a way that it meets the criteria of the organization? And if you can't answer that, don't work on this sprint. Until we can answer that, don't work on this sprint. I'll take the political flag, because that's what the product owner is supposed to do. They're supposed to go take the political flag. They're supposed to go back to the organization and go and do exactly what Ken said earlier. We don't understand why you want us to do this. And until we do that, we're not going to work on it. Now, it's a very brave thing to do. But those people that are successful in having those types of discussions, and probably not as direct as what I am, which has gotten me into trouble in the past, funnily enough, but you know, For those people that can have those types of discussions, they come away with a business problem statement that clearly articulates the why something needs to occur and helps introduce how things will occur in such a way that what happens is actually relevant to the organization and to the people that are creating. Now, what would happen if you use that type of strategy in all of your discussions for all things that you want changed in your organization, including organizational change, Kylie, which is exactly what people need to be working on, is organizational change right now, and safety. I'm going to go to this slide. Actually, I'm going to go to this slide. I think we need to create our own manifesto. And an exercise that I like doing is I hand everybody in the room 2 Post-it notes, one green one and one red one. On the green Post-it note, I say one thing you like about the process of the company and or something you don't want changed about that process. So for instance, let's talk about incident management or resolution management. One thing you like about the current process, one thing you like about the way the company deals with incident management or resolution management, or one thing that you clearly don't want changed. On the red note, you do the opposite. This is one thing that you really want changed or you don't like about incident or resolution management. You usually have 8 to 10 people in the room. I've had as many as 40. You send everybody in a coffee break, you gather up the Post-it notes and you group them into common categories. And when you do that, you come back and you find out that people more or less are thinking the same thing. We want this over this, or we believe this because we value this. And you create your own manifesto. You don't take the one from the ski lodge. You adopt and adapt to your own manifesto. And you get people to think about it in such a way that they create their own words of what they believe in and why they want to believe in it. So this is an amalgamation of ITIL words and DevOps words. And I threw this together, and I'm more than happy to argue that one phrase could go on the left side, another phrase could go on the right side. I just kind of put them this way because this is the way I like them. But I think that people need to create their own manifesto, and that is what needs to go up on the walls, and that's what people need to start looking at on a regular basis and talking about top down. Paul Wilkinson of Gaming Works, he does something quite similar. In every workshop, he asks people to write down during the workshop, but especially at the end, what did I learn or discover? What can I use in day-to-day work? And what actions am I going to take away, or are we going to take away starting today that will make a change to what we're doing? In several banks that I work in, this became big pieces of paper or website objects where people could go and post, what did I learn today? How did it help in my day-to-day work? And how am I going to use that going forward? It became an interactive idea board. And from that, they started to create different types of services and products. Some of you use Amazon, and I'm sure that if you use Amazon, you're bemused or beleaguered, depending on your point of view, with the emails that you get from Amazon that are suggestions or recommendations. The concept for those emails came from a developer many years ago. He walked into the head of marketing and said, we have so much information about what our customers do or want. We could actually make recommendations to them. And the head of marketing said, don't be daft. He went and put that change in anyway, and the world changed. Now we get recommendations all over the place. And oh, by the way, Amazon ended up with a new head of marketing. But this is an example of that type of structure. If you go to value stream mapping is the way of managing work across a stream of activities, macro level, not detail level, high level, macro level. And what you have to do as quickly as possible is work to improve it. Daily is best, but as quickly as possible, because you can't always change things on a daily basis. There are rules and regs. And what you then end up with is a new value stream. Now you have to look at that value stream and go, did we create value or did we go back the other way? If we went back the other way, what do we have to do to create value? If we did create value, can we create more value? Does it even make sense to try to create more value? But you have to have those types of discussions. And those discussions, those decisions to make that type of discussion has to be leadership down. It has to be an interactive, involved discussion. Leadership, management, product owners, whatever you want to call them, all the way down have to be involved in those discussions, such that the why we want something done and why it matters to us is felt by everybody in the organization. Visualization helps. I've seen more and more people now go to virtual whiteboards. And on those virtual whiteboards, they're putting plans up, Kanban boards, budget boards, target boards, and they're letting people respond to them. They're allowing individuals using virtual whiteboards to help drive the business forward. I think it's also being used to help people that have been stuck in their homes, not been interactive necessarily with people at work, because Zoom is great, but Zoom really isn't that great. And how do you try to get some people involved and keep that interest of people involved and keep people mentally safe? This visualization is now really coming up in the world, and people are talking about it more and more. You know, ServiceNow has really changed the way that they allow people to use the information. Atlassian has always pushed visualization, and they're getting better at it. Microsoft, all of those companies are now really getting into the visual world. And I think that flow of work and that improvement of work is going to, really take off over the next year or two, especially with the introduction of AI. Artificial intelligence is being able to go out, gather a bunch of information, and in real time, give it back to the people that need it in such a way that they can interactively make decisions, or at least have discussions about them as to what's going on with inside the organization or with a particular customer set. And that's going to help us overcome this iceberg event of ignorance. The iceberg of ignorance was created by a business management PhD student back in the late 60s. And what he noticed, and these numbers, for whatever reason, haven't changed since then. Everybody continues to use the same numbers that he used. They just draw it differently. But what he saw was staff knows everything. So my IT example of this is the service desk knows everything. The service desk knows all the good customers, the bad customers, the good apps, the bad apps, the good IT, the bad IT, the good suppliers, the bad suppliers, the good product owners and the bad product owners, because that's what they deal with all day long. They see 100% of the good and bad in organizations. For whatever reason, the higher up you go, that becomes less and less. And what we're trying to say is, as we showed in other slides, is how do you get the conversation between the people that make decisions and the people that have to act upon those decisions all work together to melt the iceberg of ignorance? Because that's the way that organizations are going to grow and really service not only themselves, but their customers and their communities. A different way of looking at that is the emperor's new blah, blah, blah. I'm sure we've all been to meetings where 2 minutes into it, you turned off. You knew that your emperor was saying something, but you'd lost focus. And what you don't want to do is be caught in that. You want to have your language match the language of the organization. It's not easy. It needs coaching. It needs people to work together. It needs people to point out to other people that what they're saying is irrational or doesn't make sense or doesn't apply, or can they explain it again, please? But if we don't have those types of conversations, I think those organizations are going to be the ones to struggle going forward.
Or would you
That's
say
me.
it's culture, Daniel, about, you know, sort of people feeling confident at the more junior levels within a business to pass it up, not just going, well, what happens if I'm wrong and I'm telling them there's a problem or whatever? You know, it's that culture of confidence, that culture of people being willing to you know, to share and feel confident to share. You know, I had a situation where we had an application many years ago that was absolutely abysmal, but we had users in Hong Kong using it, users in the Middle East using it. The users in the Middle East complained about it every single day, and yet we never got a complaint about anybody in Hong Kong. And we tried to work out what was wrong with it. And in the end, it was the fact that the Hong Kong employees felt secure in their jobs. They felt, you know, happy. Therefore, if there was a problem with the application, they could just work around it and get on with it. The staff that were in Dubai did not feel confident or protected or happy about their jobs. Their passports are held by the employer. They could be asked to leave the country if they make a mistake. So as a result, they didn't want to be accused of making any mistake. So they complained about everything just to cover their arse. But it was the same application, but what you're seeing culturally is very, very different in terms of the behaviors. And it's important that you get that culture and that behavior to work the same as much as you can, and that people feel confident in their ability to do it.
And listening to that, it sounds like you had people in Hong Kong who weren't complaining about things they should have because they just got used to working around it, but things could have been improved and been more streamlined. Whilst you had other people who were complaining about everything, regardless of whether it was important or not, as you said, to cover their own backsides.
Yeah, and management were going, it must
lead to efficiency.
Yeah, so the management were looking at what are they doing wrong in Dubai, because clearly they're doing something wrong with the application. The reality was it was the people in Hong Kong that were doing wrong by not actually saying there were problems. So management were thinking that the app was okay, and it wasn't. It was awful.
So
yeah, you know,
I think that leaders who ask questions like, if you're not telling us what's wrong, then we'll never know, are wrong. The CIO of 3E, I'm sorry, spends 70 to 75% of his time outside of meetings and offices, pre-COVID. He figured out, just like Lean says, leaders need to go to where the work is. If leaders don't see where work is being done or where customers are receiving work, i.e. stores, then they don't learn. So these managers that are learning by their monthly report or learning by waiting for somebody to come to them are wrong managers. They need to go out and they need to figure out a way of becoming engaged and understanding what's really happening in the organization day in, day out.
Yeah, that's exactly what we started to get to. Is the two things that we discovered is send your developers out to go and talk to the people who are using the apps, you know, so that they understand how they're actually being used and understand it, so they got a better understanding. And the other thing was that we sort of said our service desk people, who were all being measured on how many calls they got, was that they should come away with a value add delivered every time they went to somebody's desk. Because if all you're doing is running around fixing the problems and you're not value adding anywhere, you got a problem. Yeah, you're not fixing, you're not addressing, you're not helping. And we found that actually the PR and value and feedback with the technicians and our developers in terms of their ability to contribute, or the tech service guys able to feedback and give, went up hugely.
There was a betting organization who I can't mention that every Monday, the 5 senior leaders of the organization met in the boardroom and they discussed what happened over the weekend, because that was the predominant time that they made money. Or if it was a major event, like let's say a horse race, big, 3 or 4 day horse race, then they met every day of that. And the only person that they wanted from IT was the service desk. They felt that the service desk individual had the most information, so the service desk individual would go up to the boardroom and say, these are the types of incidents that we're having, and this was the impact on the organization. It impacted this many customers, and we lost this amount of money because they weren't able to bet, or we resolved it in this period of time, in which case we recouped this. But the service desk was able to talk to the senior leaders in the organization in such a way that we were talking the same language. And we would rotate that. Sometimes it was a junior developer. Sometimes it was a computer operator. Sometimes it was a supplier that went into the boardroom to be able to facilitate these discussions. So I totally agree with you, Ken, that people need to start having these discussions as frequently as possible. Think about all the discussions that you've heard, Ken, and you've been around for a while. The annual review, how many times have you heard the fact that we should get rid of the annual review? We should go to a different type of review process.
Many times, and I'm glad the organization I'm in has got rid of it.
Yay! What's
Daniel,
been the upside of that?
Oh, Daniel.
Well, I think people feel more engaged. People actually feel that their stuff is actually dealt with on an as it happens basis, rather than everything being stacked to one point of the year. Reviews can happen more frequently, salary upgrades can happen more frequently. People feel engaged and know what's going on.
Okay. Richard, you wanted to say something.
So I'll let Ian go first. Ian came off mute. So.
Oh, Ian.
Hello, Daniel.
Hello, Ian.
Hello, you all right? I was just going to say, in our organisation, we got rid of annual reviews for individuals, but we're now more to like team reviews. But I always thought that maybe I always thought, well, maybe he's missing a trick when we didn't do annual or monthly reviews of systems. You know, we'll review how people are performing, but we wouldn't review how a system was performing or a service was performing. I always found that a bit odd.
Well, there are organizations that are doing that now. They're treating their IT as an individual. And they're asking people, because services can change so quickly now, they're actually looking at their services or their technology as an individual and asking, are you creating value for me? Or are you creating problems for me? If you're creating value for me, great. If you're creating problems for me, let's talk about it. Now, when I say let's talk about it, you know, that's theoretical. But I like the approach of taking the things that matter to your organization and constantly looking at them and reviewing them, because now you're doing what DevOps, Agiles, ITIL, all the great organizational frameworks are saying, is looking at your organization as closely as possible to see how you can make it better. So I like that concept.
Thanks. It's interesting, Daniel. One of the clients that I've been working with recently, we've been working on their HR area. And what they've put in place is a specific team they call business assurance, which is, you know, the people who help to make sure the wheels are greased or the axles are greased or whatever.
Yep.
And part of what they've got is all of they call them processes, but it's basically all the services that they provide have all been looked at and analysed to see what is it that we do and what is it that this entails in terms of the service level and the risk to the business. And this is repetitively reviewed depending on how important that particular process is. So they've got you know, sort of dates marked. When you do a review, it's every 12 months, or it's every 3 months, or it's every 6 months is the key ones that they've gone for. So when they get to the review period, they're looking at what have we done since we last did a review, and has this changed as to how important it is to our business, the value that it produces, and the risk that it's got inherent within it. So do we need to change our focus? So they've kind of got this iterative concept built into the structure.
That brings to mind, there's a new metrics formula that's coming around where people are taking OKRs, outcome key results. And you know me, I'm always changing words around. So what are the results of outcomes, and are they key to your organization? And the only way you can answer that is to say OKRs then have to drip down or drip up, depending on your point of view, to whether or not staff are able to perform and contribute to those outcomes. And in which case then customers can indicate to you back, so customer service indicators can indicate to you back that what you're doing is of good value to them or not of good value to them. So how do you take your OKRs, your indicators of performance that are key, your KPIs, and your customer service indicators, which are probably hidden somewhere in your service level agreements, and make them all a rotating and living cycle such that on a near daily basis, you're able to pivot if you need to. And there are organizations that are actively working against those types of, you know, deadlines because of what they're doing and what they're offering. They can make money or lose money that quickly. But I understand what you're saying, Richard. It's a very good point.
Yeah, it's just sort of an interesting observation there. Well, I've got a couple of questions that have come in from the chat.
Okay.
But firstly, there's several points of thanks.
Thank you.
I have a feeling from this might be from people who imminently have or will drop off the meeting.
It is 8 o'clock. I don't blame you guys. I'm getting very thirsty, and Richard hasn't offered me a drink yet.
Unfortunately, Daniel, I'm not able to offer tonight the normal BCS hospitality that we normally would. We have a question here, littered with thanks around it, but I'll get to the point of it. Was you mentioned you've done most of these things yourself. How did your stakeholders receive or react to the 15-minute priority/obstacle question meetings? And was there a key result that you achieved?
The first time that I tried it, I failed miserably. The second time that I tried it, I failed miserably. Not as miserably as the first time, but it was still pretty awful. It took a lot of work for me to get to the point to where I was making my point in such a way that people were responsive to it and wanted to play along with me. It was a change in attitude, my attitude first. It was a change in behavior, my behavior first, before I could go and influence other people's attitudes and behavior. To be honest with you, though, once we started to get to it, things improved. We stuck to the principles of visualization. We stuck to the principles of getting people across the spectrum of a particular way of working to contribute and to take their ideas seriously, such that they would be able to experiment and see what the outcome of that was. And cloud helped a lot in that, because you can do a lot of things in cloud, not spend a lot of money to do it. And that actually got us to a way of working that was better than what we were before. It probably took, in UBS, it took 8 months. At banks in Belgium that I've worked at, it was a little bit less, but they were already more loosely structured in the way that they talk to each other.
I'm certainly hearing perseverance is a strong part of the answer.
Oh, I never promised that this was going to have, take this away and do it tomorrow, and there before the grace of God, you're fine. This is going to take time and effort. And the very first person that you're going to need to change and prepare is yourself.
Another question we have on the board that's come through. This came through quite a while ago, but you're in full flow at the time. Who is the pizza company?
Who is the Peter company?
Pizza company. You mentioned a pizza company in Herne Bay.
Pizza.
Yeah.
It has a great name. It's called Herne Bay Pizza.
I have a feeling that's not a global organization.
No, but it does have 35,000 people that it tries to attract on a daily basis. So it may not be global to our way of thinking, but it's global to their way of thinking, if you get my drift.
Absolutely, and I actually really like the example, because one of the challenges with any example, if you try and make it too big, it's difficult for people to digest.
Yep.
I could see exactly the point that you were trying to make and see how to translate that into other examples. Another comment about people liking your examples of the government and their challenges with their sites, and that some of them work relatively well in more simple situations. Okay, what I would like to ask here is there any other questions that people would like to ask, or any other points to be made, or any experiences that you have that you would like to share, which may be pertinent to the topics that have been raised this evening? If you do, please unmute yourself. I'm going to go with, I think that's it on the personal questions there, Daniel.
Okay,
So,
I'd like to thank Ken and Kylie for their interaction, and Ian for piping up. Ken, your comments were very useful and helped, so thank you very much for that, and Kylie as well. You as well, Richard. Always love you, babe.
Thank you very much, Daniel. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you to everyone who's contributed and everyone for being here and making this session what it is.
Hey,
and of course, sorry,
it's David Barrow here. I do have a point to raise very quickly, if I may.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, David.
So, and I think it's pertinent because you mentioned it within your presentation, Daniel, as a news item about, we've been talking about leaders leading the way out. And I think we've seen an example today where they may have got it wrong. And that is with that European Super League that you mentioned. So whilst you've been presenting, 2 of those teams have resigned from the Super League before it's even started. And I'm told that the leader of Manchester United, Edward Woodward, has also resigned. So I think we're seeing a real example there of where they've actually failed to take the temperature of their customers and of their colleagues and their competitors in this particular scenario.
It boggles the imagination. I mean, when Pep Guardiola and Klopp stand up in front of the media and go, hey, we didn't know about this. That just boggles my mind that you would be able to make this type of strategic comment and not let the 2 individuals that are supposed to make it happen know that you're about to do this. I'm just flabbergasted. But we see this time and time again in organizations.
Yeah, and they've disabled the power of their leaders in the last couple.
Yay! Thank goodness. Thank you, David, for letting me know. That brings joy to my head.
And thank you for this evening.
Do you know what? You've just completely dated this webinar. Everyone's going to know exactly when it happened.
Yeah.
And can I just present a different perspective working in a very male-dominated industry? I have 3 WhatsApp groups or Signal groups or whatever on my phone at the moment. 2 of them are IT-oriented groups, and the topic all day in both groups has been football. The 3rd is my Slimming World group. It's all women. The topic has not been mentioned once.
My wife loves football. My wife loves American football. My wife loves normal football. My wife loves basketball. She's heavy into sports. And my wife, being a nurse of 40 years experience, is quite fluent in many languages. And some of those languages she used this morning or yesterday when she read about the European Super League and how daft it was. So I would just like to counter that. I know, and on my Facebook page, I know many individuals that were dismayed with what was happening and voiced it appropriately.
Well, it's certainly clearly a world-shattering event. I don't understand it, but that's fine.
I Kylie, am more on your side of the fence on this. I think the key lessons from this was, I think, more about the idea of collaboration and communication of strategic intent and making sure you have the right people communicated with, brought on board, etc. Before making a decision. So I mean, I don't follow football news particularly, but it does impinge on my life involuntarily, like it does on everybody who lives in this part of the world. And it was a bit of a surprise for me. I'm guessing it probably hasn't been that widely announced from what you're saying. But Daniel, as I see from your slide here, and as you have announced, subsequent to you very kindly volunteering to present tonight, you've put here that you are retiring. And as a former member of the same committee, which you mentioned earlier, the Service Management Specialist Group at the BCS. I must say it has been a pleasure and an honour to have been your colleague through that time. I'm also aware that this is potentially the last time that you will be speaking at the BCS event. So as I think it's probably the only one you have arranged at the moment, but the it may fall on me as chair of the merged Service Management and IT Asset Management Specialist Group on behalf of the BCS. So thank you very much for all of the effort that you put in the years that you were a committee member. You did a tireless job organising a lot of events, which I know got a lot of people very excited.
Thank you very much, Richard. So it's been good fun. I love the BCS.
So one thing I've also noticed with the BCS is that when people retire, they've got a bit more time to volunteer. So should you ever want to continue contributing to the BCS,
Richard, I'm sorry, you're breaking up. Hello?
I would just like to make it clear you're always welcome to have a conversation with us. And I will leave it at that. And I'm sure all of your colleagues for your career would like to echo that, even if you've challenged them in.
Well, I'm not, you know, I'm going to keep learning and applying. I mean, AI and robotics are fascinating things. And I wish I'd had it when I started. I think AI and the service desk are two of the most powerful tools that any manager, regardless of what they are in an organization, should be looking at and using. So I leave it at that.
Thank you very much for that last note on our direction for the future. Thank you again on behalf of the BCS and everyone here tonight. And yes,
welcome.
Look forward to talking to you relatively soon in the future.
Stay safe, everybody.
Thanks very much, Daniel. Appreciate it.
Cheers, Daniel.
Not a problem.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks, Richard. Bye.
Have a good evening.